All right, SOJ 333 students. So this video is for week 2. Instead of seeing my face, you're going to see Lalima for week 2. I'm just experimenting with different ways of making videos since we're in a pandemic and everything's online right now. So week 2 topic is intro and history to prisons. So it kind of bleeds into what we covered in week 1. So here's my overview. This is my instructor video from summer 2019, and as soon as this video is finished, I will replace that 2019 video with the one I'm making now. And then here you have a short little video covering Michel Foucault's concept of power and control. So I wanted to include some classical sort of theoretical concepts related to survey of criminology. That's also, part of this like critical feminist perspective. And so Michel Foucault's work is really good at being critical of the criminal system, before we had people critiquing the prison industrial complex like we see in mainstream documentaries such as 13. So I decided that was a good theoretical foundation to sort of root our class in addition to intersectionality. However, Michel Foucault's work is very dense, especially because it's translated from French. And so rather than have you read original texts, I thought it would be more appropriate for a 300 level class just to watch this video. All right. So in my last week video for week 1, I talked about social institutions. And so before Michel Foucault, who is a post-structuralist, you had a lot of academics, researchers, scholars, the old dead white guys, right? Like Durkheim and Marx, talking about social institutions as these structures, where they were authoritative structures that sort of pass down these rules, and that's where all the power was. So if you think about the criminal system as a social institution, and it controls our lives with these laws and the prison system, that's sort of like a structuralist, if you will, approach to thinking about this top-down power structure. And that was the way academics were thinking about social institutions for a very long time. And then post-structuralists said, okay, fine, but like power operates in other ways as well. It's not always this top-down thing that happens within social institutions. And so Michel Foucault, as well as other post-structuralists, they talked about power in a different way. And so when we think about how power is operating in a post-structural sense, we're not always thinking about this top-down approach. We're thinking about how power sort of is operating within our everyday lives. And so if we're thinking specifically about this type of power in terms of the criminal system, it's important to acknowledge what Michel Foucault wrote about as the panopticon. And so the panopticon is actually an architectural structure where you have a sort of like guard tower in the center, and then cells all around that guard tower. And it gives the people who are in the cells, in our case, prisoners, this mentality of somebody's always watching me because there's always somebody in that guard tower. And so they can see me, but I can't necessarily see them. And so that means if there was only one guard in that guard tower, and maybe that guard has fallen asleep, they're working too much overtime. Prisoners don't know that, right? They still think there's a guard watching them 24/7. And so that means that inmates, like theoretically, when we're thinking about power in this panopticon, that means that prisoners are going to behave and they're going to follow the prison rules, even if they can't necessarily physically see the guard who's watching them, because they think someone is always watching them. And so you don't need this authority figure, this guard, coming out from outside of the guard tower and telling them, oh, you need to behave, you're breaking the rules. It's not that kind of top-down power. It's the inmates doing the rules and doing what they're supposed to because they're regulating themselves for fear of getting reprimanded because they're being watched. And so it's not this top-down approach to power. It's this power's operating around the inmates all the time. They always have to do what they're supposed to because they don't know when they're being watched and when someone who's in a position of power is going to come out and say, oh, you broke this rule. I saw you do it on my video recorder, right? There's video cameras in prisons now. Or I saw you in my guard tower, but you couldn't see me, but I saw you do this bad thing. And so that's the idea of a panopticon. And that work is really important to understanding how post-structuralists think about power operating within prisons. And for our purposes, that's the only thing we really need to think about in terms of power and control in post-structuralism. So I hope that helps you think through a post-structural foundation for understanding prisons and power. And you'll see here that the discussion leader project for week 2 is going to come up shortly. We're jumping into the Angela Davis text, Are Prisons Obsolete? So be sure to read chapters 1 and 2 in Are Prisons Obsolete? Here's your little checklist. You have a quiz to take for week 1. Oh, sorry, this is week 2. You have a quiz to take week 2, and it's going to cover Michel Foucault, the Panopticon. There might also be some quiz questions about week 1 material. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about that.